You tap a glowing circle on your phone screen, and like immediately a moment is just frozen in pixels. It takes less than a second, and we completely take it for granted, right?
Oh, totally. We don't even think about it anymore.
Yeah, but get this. Humanity today takes more photographs every 2 minutes than were taken throughout the entire 19th century combined.
Every 2 minutes. I mean, that scale is just, it's almost impossible to wrap your head around.
It really is. So to figure out how we reached this staggering volume of visual data, we are using Robert Hirsch's definitive book, Seizing the Light, A Social and Aesthetic History of Photography. It's basically our guide today for this deep dive into the medium's whole evolution.
And what makes Hirsch's research so vital for us is that, this isn't just a dry timeline of optical gadgets or chemical formulas.
Yeah.
What we're really tracking here is a massive shift in human perception. We're looking at how photography evolved from this scientific, supposedly objective mirror of nature into a highly malleable tool. A tool used for intense self-expression, social change, and honestly, frequently, the manipulation of reality itself.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I think most people assume photography started with the invention of the camera in the 1800s.
Yeah, that's a super common misconception. But the first thing to grasp is that the desire to freeze a likeness, to capture reality, existed millennia before anyone actually built a functional camera.
Like way back.
Exactly. You can trace the fundamental physics of projecting an image way, way back. I mean, in the 5th century BCE, the Chinese philosopher Mo Tin observed that light passing through a small pinhole into a darkened area projects an exact inverted image of the outside world.
Wait, 5th century BCE? That's incredible.
Yeah, it's ancient physics. And then centuries later, you had Arabian mathematicians like Alhazen detailing how altering the size of that aperture changes the sharpness of the projection.
But knowing how light bends through a hole doesn't automatically give you a photograph.
No, not at all.
Like, you can't just skip from ancient physics straight to the Kodak camera. There had to be a catalyst, right? A reason people suddenly needed to trap those optical projections permanently.
Right. And the real paradigm shift required a change in how humans valued visual accuracy. And that really crystallized during the European Renaissance. Suddenly, you have this intense societal concentration on science, precise observation, and mathematics.
Oh, yeah. That's when the obsession with linear perspective just completely hits the art world.
Exactly.
You have architects and theorists, like Alberti, describing the act of drawing as if you were literally looking through an open window. They wanted mathematical perfection in their art, so they started relying heavily on a tool called the camera obscura, which translates to darkroom.
Right. And we shouldn't picture a handheld device here. I think people hear camera and think of a little box.
Yeah, like a vintage Polaroid or something.
Exactly. But in the late 1400s, Leonardo da Vinci was writing about the camera obscura as a physical architectural space. An artist would literally walk inside a pitch-black room. A tiny hole in one wall would allow light to filter in, and it would project this vivid, moving, full-color image of the outside landscape onto the opposite wall.
So it's essentially an immersive, room-sized piece of tracing paper.
That is a perfect way to describe it.
And there is strong historical evidence that master painters, artists like Vermeer or Caravaggio, use these optical projections to accurately map out three-dimensional space on a flat canvas. It gave them the precise geometry of reality, which, kind of explains why some Renaissance paintings have that uncanny, almost photographic focus.
They absolutely do. But consider the massive bottleneck in this process.
A human element.
Precisely. The camera obscura projects a flawless optical phenomenon, but it is entirely ephemeral. If you wanted to capture that image, an artist still had to stand in the dark and painstakingly trace the projection by hand.
So you have this perfect mechanical projection, but you are entirely limited by human labor and rendering skill. Like, how does society finally break past that bottleneck?
By entering the Industrial Revolution,
Mm-hmm.
society completely restructured itself. You had a rapidly rising middle class, factory owners, bankers, merchants who possessed new wealth.
Right?
And historically, having your portrait painted was a luxury reserved strictly for royalty and the aristocracy. But now, this new middle class wanted to be commemorated too. They demanded a cheap, automatic way to mass-produce exact visual descriptions without paying for months of expensive human labor. They basically needed a chemical surface sensitive enough to, quote-unquote, remember the light projected by the camera obscura.
Which introduces a whole new element of danger.
Oh, yeah.
Because to do that, they had to start playing with incredibly volatile chemistry. And the breakthrough actually starts as a total accident, which I love.
Those are always the best discoveries.
Right. Back in 1727, a scientist named Johann Heinrich Schulze was trying to create a glow-in-the-dark substance using chalk and nitric acid. But his acid happened to be contaminated with silver.
A very fortunate contamination, as it turns out.
Extremely fortunate, because Schulze notices that when sunlight hits this chalky mixture, the silver salts turn deep purple. And the genius part is he realizes it's the light, not the heat of the sun, causing the reaction. He even stenciled words onto glass jars and let the sun bake the text directly into the chalk.
It's amazing. But Schultz proved that silver halides react to light, right? He didn't actually attempt to make the reaction permanent. The next major leap happened 70 years later with Thomas Wedgwood in the early 1800s.
Ah, Wedgwood.
Yeah. Wedgwood took flat objects like leaves or painted transparencies and laid them flat on white leather that he had soaked in silver nitrate.
Okay, so the sunlight would hit the leather and darken the silver everywhere except where the leaf was blocking it. He was basically creating a perfect white shadow of the leaf against a dark, sun-baked background.
Yes, exactly.
But wait, if Wedgwood is producing actual physical sunprints on leather in the early 1800s, why isn't he universally credited as the father of photography?
Because of a brutal chemical catch-22.
Oh, right.
Wedgwood couldn't figure out how to fix the image. To see his beautiful silhouettes, he obviously had to look at them under a light source. But the moment that viewing light hit the leather, it would immediately continue reacting with the unexposed silver nitrate.
Oh, no. So the light you need to see the art is the exact thing destroying it.
Exactly. The white silhouette of the leaf would just keep darkening until the entire piece turned completely black.
Yeah.
The process of viewing the image destroyed it. He could only look at his life's work in a dark room by the briefest flicker of candlelight.
Wow. It's like a built-in self-destruct sequence. You finally manage to capture the image, but the simple act of looking at it erases it. That must have been agonizing.
It was incredibly frustrating. So the overarching problem for the next few decades was figuring out how to halt that chemical reaction. The race to solve the permanence problem defined the 1830s, and it came down to a rivalry between two men with completely opposite approaches.
Right, Louis-Jacques Daguerre in Paris and William Henry Fox Talbot in England. Let's look at Daguerre first. He wasn't really a traditional scientist, was he?
No, not at all. He was a theatrical showman.
Yeah, he ran these massive 350-seat diorama illusions in Paris. He was chasing a highly detailed, pristine mirror of reality to just wow his audiences.
And he was relentless. Daguerre experimented with highly polished, silver-plated sheets of copper. He sensitized the surface using iodine vapor, which formed a microscopically thin layer of silver iodide. And after exposing this metal plate inside a camera, he discovered a mechanism that changed everything, the latent image.
The latent image, the idea that the image is there but invisible to the naked eye.
Exactly. The exposure to light created microscopic changes in the silver. Daguerre found that if he suspended that exposed plate over heated mercury vapor—
Which sounds incredibly hazardous to your health, by the way.
oh, incredibly toxic. But the mercury would condense precisely on the light-struck areas of the silver. It physically built up a visible, incredibly sharp, frosty white amalgam.
You can't argue with the results. I mean, he gets this stunningly precise, one-of-a-kind image on metal, the daguerreotype, and he knew what he had. He actually ran into an optical shop owner in Paris and triumphantly bragged, "I have forced the sun to paint pictures for me."
I love that quote. It was a monumental achievement. But across the English Channel, Talbot was working on something fundamentally different.
Right.
Talbot was an English gentleman scientist who famously got frustrated while on his honeymoon at Lake Como in Italy.
Best origin story ever. Just getting mad on vacation.
Exactly. He was trying to sketch the scenery using an optical tracing tool called a camera lucida, and he realized he had absolutely no talent for drawing. His sheer frustration at his own lack of skill drove him to invent what became the calotype.
But Talbot wasn't making pristine metal mirrors like Daguerre. He was making negative images on sensitized paper, which, from a purely marketing perspective, sounds like a tough sell.
Very true.
If I'm a Victorian consumer and I see Daguerre's razor-sharp, flawless metal plate next to Talbot's fuzzy, reverse-color paper negative, I'm choosing the metal plate every time.
Aesthetically, it was definitely a harder sell. The paper fiber softened the image, and a negative is just counterintuitive for the human brain to process. However, The mechanism of Talbot's invention was far superior in the long run.
Because it was reproducible.
Yes. Because it was on translucent paper, you could shine light through that negative onto a second sensitized sheet of paper. The dark areas of the negative blocked the light, and the light areas let it pass through, creating a positive copy. And you could repeat that process infinitely.
So Daguerre's invention was essentially a dead end. It was beautiful, but singular.
Exactly. Talbot's process was scalable. Talbot invented the negative-positive architecture. This mechanism became the foundational DNA of all analog photography up until the digital age. But we have to acknowledge that neither Daguerre nor Talbot independently solved the fading problem that plagued Wedgwood.
Right, the fixing issue.
Yeah, we owe that to the brilliant astronomer and chemist, Sir John Herschel.
Herschel swoops in with the missing puzzle piece in 1839. He freely shared his discovery of a chemical compound called hyposulfite of soda, commonly known as hypo.
The mechanism of hypo is just incredibly elegant. Instead of just trying to make the unexposed silver insensitive to light, hypo literally dissolves the unexposed silver halides so they can be completely washed away in water.
So it just removes the chemical threat entirely.
Yes, making the image permanent. Not to mention, Herschel also gave the medium its permanent vocabulary. He coined the terms photography, negative, positive, and emulsion.
Which is huge. So with the chemistry finally locked down, the medium absolutely explodes. But this is where the societal panic sets in. Because once you have a machine that can flawlessly freeze reality, people immediately start arguing about what that frozen reality is actually supposed to represent.
Oh, absolutely. The rest of the 19th century was defined by this severe tension between cold, hard science and high art. By the 1850s, a new photographic process emerged called the collodion wet plate.
Okay, what did that do?
It used glass plates instead of paper negatives, which brilliantly combined the razor-sharp microscopic detail of the daguerreotype with the infinite reproducibility of Talbot's negative.
And the general public loved it. It gave them exactly what they thought they wanted, absolute unvarnished truth. People were so obsessed they were getting photographs of buildings and literally using a magnifying glass to count every single brick in the image.
Because they equated mechanical detail with objective reality. But fine artists found this mechanical literalness horrifying. They argued that a machine capturing every stray piece of trash in the street or every blemish on a person's face wasn't art.
Right, because traditional art required human interpretation.
Exactly. Selective editing and, moral elevation. So photographers like Henry Peach Robinson and Oscar Raeflander decided to force the camera to behave like a painter's brush.
Which leads to Robinson's famous 1858 image, Fading Away. It depicts a tragically beautiful scene of a young girl dying of consumption, surrounded by her grieving family. It looks like a single devastating moment captured in a bedroom, but it's a complete fabrication.
Entirely constructed. It was made using a meticulous technique called combination printing. Robinson photographed each model separately under controlled studio lighting. He then painstakingly masked and blended multiple different negatives together in the darkroom to create a seamless scene that never actually existed in reality.
It's incredible to think about. Literally decades after photography is invented, people are already basically doing complex Photoshop composites to fake reality.
Yeah, the impulse was there from the start.
It really makes you realize that manipulating images isn't some modern symptom of digital software. It's a fundamental human urge to tell a highly specific, curated story.
That's spot on. The psychological drive behind combination printing was to elevate photography to the prestigious status of classical painting by proving it could convey complex emotional narratives, not just record visual inventory. But beyond manipulating physical space, photography also profoundly changed our perception of time.
Right, because for centuries, a painted portrait was a singular, static representation. It was an amalgamation of many sittings into one fixed ideal of a person. And photography started out the same way, purely due to the long exposure times required by early chemistry.
Nobody could smile because you couldn't hold it for a minute straight.
Exactly. But as the emulsions got faster and more sensitive, the camera began to slice time thinner and thinner.
A brilliant example of this shift is the work of French photographer Paul Nadar in 1886. He was tasked with photographing the famous scientist Chevreul on his 100th birthday.
Wow, 100 years old in 1886.
I know, right? But rather than taking one stoic, formal portrait, Nadar shot a rapid sequence of 21 photos while Chevreul was casually conversing. He then printed these photos sequentially, right alongside the actual transcript of what Chevreul was saying at that exact microsecond.
It's the birth of the photo essay. You are literally watching the micro expressions on a 100-year-old man's face change as he argues a point or laughs. The camera transitions from a mirror into a time machine.
It really does.
It allows you to experience the emotional flow of a moment long after the subjects are gone.
So for roughly 150 years, the fundamental architecture holds steady. Whether it's glass plates, paper negatives, or plastic celluloid film, photography is a physical trace. Light bounces off a subject, passes through a lens, hits a silver emulsion, and chemically burns a permanent footprint into a tangible surface. And then the late 1990s arrive.
The digital revolution. And reading through Hirsch's analysis, you realize this wasn't just a technological upgrade. It was an existential shock to the entire medium. Photography entirely lost its physical tether to the real world.
Absolutely. The chemical footprint was completely replaced by algorithms. In a digital camera, a sensor translates light waves into electrical voltage, which is then quantified into endless strings of binary code and eventually rendered as dematerialized pixels on a glowing screen.
The image is no longer a physical object.
No, it's just data.
And the sheer speed of this dematerialization was ruthless. Look at Eastman Kodak. They absolutely dominated the 20th century. They ingrained the slogan, "You push the button, we do the rest," into global culture.
They were everywhere.
And they went completely bankrupt because their entire empire was built on manufacturing and selling physical film and paper in a world that suddenly only valued frictionless data.
The loss of the physical negative brought back all those 19th century anxieties about truth and manipulation, but amplified to an unprecedented degree. Take Pedro Meyer's 1995 CD-ROM project, Truths and Fictions.
Oh, that's a great example.
He aggressively used early digital tools to seamlessly stitch together gritty documentary photographs with digital alterations. He was actively confronting the viewer, asking a terrifying question: if pixels can be altered without leaving a single physical trace, can we ever trust the documentary nature of a photograph again?
Back in 1859, the poet Oliver Wendell Holmes famously called the photograph a mirror with a memory because of its unyielding physical detail. But looking at the digital shift, it feels like that phrase has completely inverted.
How do you mean?
Well, when you look at the endless layers of filters, AI generation, and curated screens we interact with today, photography has become a memory without a mirror.
Oh, I love that. The cultural theorist Jean Baudrillard actually wrote extensively about this concept of the simulacrum. In the digital age, we enter an endless passageway of mirrors, where images no longer reflect reality. They simply reflect, reference, and distort other images. The simulation replaces the real.
Which perfectly contextualizes what artists are doing today in the social media age. Look at the work of Penelope Umbrico. She goes on to image-sharing platforms and downloads thousands of identical canonical photographs of mountains, which is like the ultimate symbol of enduring physical reality.
Right.
Then she strips them of their original context, runs them through hundreds of different smartphone camera apps, and applies thousands of synthetic filters.
She systematically dismantles the idea of the original masterwork.
Yeah.
By aggressively applying consumer automated technology to these revered subjects, she creates this fluid, hallucinogenic art. She proves that the camera is no longer a tool for capturing a fixed reality. It is an engine of endless iteration.
If we trace the entire arc from Alberti's open window to Umbrico's distorted pixels, the constant thread is that photography bends to human desire. We demanded a way to capture reality, then we demanded a way to alter it, and now we demand a way to instantly broadcast it.
Exactly.
But recognizing that evolution is key. Every photograph is a construction shaped by the biases of the person holding the lens or the engineer writing the algorithm.
The medium has never been passive.
Yeah.
It actively shapes how we remember and understand our world.
It really makes you realize that when you pull up your camera roll, you aren't looking at raw truths, you're looking at interpretations. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Robert Hirsch's Seizing the Light.
But before you go, consider this. We spent a significant amount of time discussing how desperately early inventors fought to make images permanent, spending decades trying to stop their silver prints from fading to black.
Right, fighting for permanence.
Today, we create billions of digital photos effortlessly, but they are trapped on decaying hard drives, unreadable floppy disks, and transient cloud servers. If a massive solar flare wiped out our data centers tomorrow, the people of the 22nd century might actually have fewer surviving physical photographs of us than we have of the Victorians from the 1850s.